How do you and how does this government define a woman?
People define themselves, people define their own genders. We have rules in place now. If someone wants to change their gender on their birth certificate, for example, there's a process that they go through in order to do that.
What it does is it allows you to change your birth certificate. And so you can say that you were born male, but you can change to be female and vice versa. But also you can say, oh, I was born genderqueer or I was born agender. So it allows you to essentially choose any gender identity that you like and then say that's how you were born. But common sense will tell us that's not how you were born. When we know from ultrasounds in the womb what sex a child is. And so this is a profoundly unscientific sort of law. Let me first of all explain what impact this is going to have on women's safety and women's sports. What that means is that a male who registers as a female will be entitled to enter into any female single-sex space, into the women's changing rooms at the public swimming pool, into a women's refuge even, and they'll be allowed to engage in women's sports. What that means is essentially that women's gyms, to take an example, will not be able to exclude males who are registered as female. And think about the implications of this for, say, swimming pools, public changing rooms. We don't go around asking people for their birth certificates. So if a man is there in the women's changing room, it's very difficult to say they shouldn't be there. That affects women's safety, but at a more fundamental level, it affects women's bodily privacy and the bodily privacy of girls too. They will be unable to say no to a male who's in their changing rooms. There are shocking things happening all over the Western world now, in Ireland, in Canada, where seriously dangerous men, multiple sex offenders, are being placed in women's jails. If they have changed their gender identity and registered as female before they are committed to prison, then they'll have to be placed in women's jails. It is beyond extraordinary.
Facts have to continue to matter. Facts have to remain the basis for all argument in our societies. This runs completely against the scientific method. You know, the distinguished biologist and atheist Richard Dawkins, he said, very straightforward, he said, I'm a biologist, there are two sexes. That's it. That's it. Now, unfortunately, we live in an era which pretends there aren't sexes as gender, and it's assigned at birth by bigoted nurses. And I think it's an example of a society that is just sort of coming apart, where really the most basic thing we know from the beginning of our lives, are we a boy or a girl? Is that person a boy or is that person a girl? The most basic thing that parents ask, are you expecting a boy or a girl? Now has become this impossible to answer question. It's an example of absolute deterioration from the bottom of society or from the top down, whichever way you look at it. These are deeply confused adults with a kind of mental illness, as far as I can see it at this stage. The sort of fag end of civilizations, this sort of interest in hermaphroditism, as it would have been called in the past, becomes an obsession. You see it in late Roman antiquity, late Greek antiquity. You could argue you see it in Weimar Germany, to use one of the more overused examples, but it's actually a pretty pertinent one, where basically all of these sort of norms break down.